the fluorescent lights of Hartwell. Industries hummed their usual monotonous song as Marcus wiped down the marble floors of the executive wing. It was 11:47 p.m., and the building had emptied hours ago, or so he thought. His worn sneakers squeaked against the polished surface as he pushed his mop bucket toward the grand atrium, where the company held its elaborate galas and conferences. Tomorrow morning, 500 employees would walk across this very floor without a second thought about the man who made it shine. Marcus didn't mind the invisibility. In fact, he preferred it. At 42, he'd learned that being overlooked meant being left alone, and being left alone meant having time to think about the only person who mattered, his daughter, Sophie. The accident had happened 3 years ago. A drunk driver, a rainy Tuesday, and his wife, Maria, never came home. Sophie, who'd been in the back seat, survived but lost her sight. At 7 years old, she'd traded crayons for a cane, her bright paintings for the sound of her father's voice guiding her through a world that had suddenly gone dark. The settlement barely covered the medical bills, and Marcus's management position at a marketing firm disappeared when he needed flexibility for Sophie's endless therapy appointments. The janitorial job at Hartwell paid less, but the overnight shift meant he could be there when Sophie woke up, walk her to her special school, and tuck her in before heading back to work. "Just us now, princess," he'd whisper every night, kissing her forehead. "Just us against the world." What Marcus didn't know was that someone was watching him that Tuesday night. 3 floors above, in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Catherine Hartwell sat in her leather chair, staring at quarterly reports that blurred together like abstract art. As CEO of her late father's tech empire, she'd spent 15 years making impossible decisions, cutting costs, maximizing profits, and building walls so high around her heart that even she couldn't remember what warmth felt like. Her marriage had crumbled 2 years ago. Her ex-husband claimed she'd chosen spreadsheets over their relationship, and maybe he was right. Her adult children called on holidays out of obligation, their voices polite and distant. At 56, Catherine had everything society said she should want and nothing that made her want to wake up in the morning. She'd stayed late reviewing termination proposals. The board wanted to cut costs by 15%, which meant laying off over 100 employees. Her assistant had highlighted the janitorial staff, easy targets, contract workers, people whose names she'd never learned. Catherine rose from her desk, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she walked to the window. That's when she saw him in the atrium below, the janitor, dancing. Not dancing exactly, moving, swaying. His mop had been abandoned against a pillar, and he held something in his arms. No, someone. A small figure in a pink jacket, her feet perched on his work boots, her hands gripping his shirt. Catherine squinted, leaning closer to the glass. A child. There was a child in her building at midnight. She should have been angry. There were liability issues, safety protocols, rules about unauthorized personnel. But something stopped her from reaching for the phone. Instead, she watched. The janitor was humming. She couldn't hear it, but she could see his lips moving, see the gentle way he guided the little girl across the pristine floor. The child's head was tilted back, a smile of pure joy illuminating her face. Her eyes were closed, but not in the way people close their eyes when they're tired. There was something different, something that made Catherine's breath catch. The girl was blind. Catherine's hand moved to her chest, pressing against the ache that suddenly bloomed there. She watched as the janitor spun slowly, carefully, his daughter's laughter almost visible in the way her body shook with delight. This wasn't just a dance. This was a father giving his daughter the gift of movement, of grace, of feeling beautiful in a world she couldn't see. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, Marcus counted softly, his voice carrying the melody of an old waltz Maria used to love. "You're doing perfect, Sophie. Just like a real princess at a ball." "Tell me again, Daddy," Sophie said, her voice bright with wonder. "Tell me about the ceiling." Marcus looked up at the vaulted glass dome above them, at the way the moonlight streamed through, creating patterns of silver and shadow. "It's like dancing under the stars, baby girl. The whole sky is watching you, and they're all thinking, 'Who's that beautiful dancer? She must be somebody really special.'" Sophie giggled, squeezing his hands tighter. "I wish I could go to a real dance one day." "You will," Marcus promised, though his heart cracked at the lie. The father-daughter dance at her school was next month, in the Riverside Hotel ballroom. Tickets were $75 per person. He'd been picking up extra shifts, but the math didn't work. Between rent, Sophie's mobility instructor, and the new prescription for her seizures, there was nothing left. "You already are at a real dance," he added, spinning her one more time. "This is the fanciest ballroom in the whole city." Up in her office, Catherine felt something break open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Tears blurred her vision as she watched the janitor dip his daughter, watched the child's head fall back in absolute trust, watched a love so pure and uncomplicated it made every decision she'd ever made seem hollow. She thought about the termination list on her desk. Was this man's name on it? Was she about to destroy this moment, this relationship, this small island of joy in what was clearly an ocean of struggle? Catherine turned from the window, her mind racing. She pulled up the employee database, fingers flying across the keyboard. Third shift custodial staff. There were 12 names. She cross-referenced them with human resources files, looking for anyone with dependents, anyone who matched what she'd just witnessed. Marcus Thompson, 42 years old, widower. One dependent, Sophie Thompson, age 10. Special needs accommodation requests for schedule flexibility. 2 years with the company, never late, never absent, never a single complaint. Never noticed. Catherine printed his file and sat back down, reading every word. The sparse details painted a picture of quiet, desperation, a man working for $14.50 an hour, with no benefits because contractors didn't qualify, shouldering a tragedy that would have broken most people. She read the supervisor notes. Excellent work ethic. Goes beyond requirements. Found him repairing broken equipment on his own time to save company money. She looked at the termination list. His name wasn't on it, but his entire shift was. The board wanted to outsource the custodial services to a cheaper contractor. These 12 people would receive 2 weeks' notice and a handshake. Catherine stood abruptly, her chair rolling back. She walked to her door, threw it open, and headed for the stairs. Her heels echoed in the stairwell as she descended, each step feeling like a choice, like a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. She pushed through the atrium doors. Marcus froze, Sophie still balanced on his feet. His face drained of color as he recognized the woman striding toward them. The CEO herself, the woman whose photo hung in the lobby, the woman who probably had the power to fire him with a single word. "Miss Hartwell, he stammered, gently setting Sophie down. "I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't have brought her here. My sitter canceled last minute and I couldn't leave her alone. I swear she hasn't touched anything. We were just dancing," Catherine finished softly, her eyes on Sophie, who'd turned toward the sound of voices. Her white cane extended cautiously. "Is that the queen?" Sophie whispered loudly to her father. "She sounds like a queen." Catherine felt her throat tighten. When was the last time someone had looked at her, truly, looked, and seen anything other than a title, a bank account, or an obstacle? This child, who couldn't see at all, somehow saw her more clearly than anyone had in years. "What's your name?" Catherine asked, kneeling down, not caring about the expensive fabric of her suit against the just-cleaned floor. "Sophie Thompson. I'm 10 years old. My daddy works here, and he's the best daddy in the whole world." "I can see that," Catherine said, her voice breaking slightly. She looked up at Marcus, at the fear in his eyes, and made a decision that felt like waking up from a very long sleep. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like to speak with you in my office tomorrow. Afternoon, perhaps? Say 2 o'clock? Marcus's face went even paler. "Ma'am, please. I need this job. I know I broke the rules, but—" Catherine raised a hand, standing up. 2 o'clock. "And Mr. Thompson, bring Sophie. I have something I'd like to discuss with both of you." She turned and walked away before he could respond, before she could second-guess what she was about to do. Behind her, she heard Sophie ask, "Daddy, why are you crying?" The next afternoon, Marcus arrived at the executive suite with Sophie's hand in his, wearing his only dress shirt and the tie he'd worn to Maria's funeral. His heart hammered against his ribs. Sophie sensed his tension and squeezed his hand 3 times. Their secret code for "I love you." Catherine's assistant led them into an office that seemed bigger than Marcus's entire apartment. Catherine sat behind her massive desk, but when they entered, she came around to sit in the chairs beside them, creating a circle rather than a hierarchy. "Sophie," Catherine began, "your father told you this was a ballroom last night. Would you like to know a secret?" Sophie nodded, her face turned toward Catherine's voice. "Every year this company holds a gala. Black ties, evening gowns, champagne, a real orchestra. It's in 3 weeks. I'd like you and your father to be my guests of honor." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Miss Hartwell, I don't understand." Catherine looked at him directly. "I saw you last night. I saw how you love your daughter. I saw how you turned a midnight shift into magic. And I realized I've been running this company the way my father taught me, like a machine. Efficient, profitable, cold." She pulled out the termination list and in one swift motion tore it in half. "I'm tired of being cold. I'm restructuring our custodial services, bringing everyone in-house with full benefits. Health insurance, paid time off, education assistance. You'll receive back pay to compensate for the difference in benefits you should have had all along." Marcus couldn't breathe. The numbers she was describing, they meant Sophie could get the vision therapy her doctors had recommended. They meant he wouldn't have to choose between groceries and medication. They meant he could breathe. "But why?" he whispered. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Because I have children I barely speak to. Because I built an empire and lost my humanity somewhere along the way. Because last night, watching you dance with your daughter, I remembered what actually matters. You reminded me what it means to be human." She reached across and took Sophie's hand. "And you, sweet girl, helped me see clearly for the first time in years." Sophie smiled, tilting her head. "You're not a queen. You're a fairy godmother." Catherine laughed through her tears. "I'd like to be, if you'll let me." 3 weeks later, the Hartwell Industries Gala transformed the atrium into a wonderland of lights and music. But the moment everyone would remember happened when Marcus Thompson, in a rented tuxedo, escorted his daughter onto the dance floor. Sophie wore a pink princess gown Catherine had insisted on buying, and her face glowed with joy as the orchestra played. Catherine watched from the side. Her own children, who'd flown in after she'd called them, crying and asking for a second chance, standing beside her. Around the room, 100 employees who'd nearly lost their jobs stood a little taller, loved their work a little more, because someone had finally seen them. As Marcus spun Sophie under the stars visible through the glass dome, he caught Catherine's eye and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Catherine nodded, understanding that the thanks went both ways. He'd shown her how to dance again, not the practiced steps of corporate galas, but the real dance of compassion, connection, and choosing love over profit. Sometimes the most powerful people in the world need reminding. That power means nothing if you can't use it to make someone else's life better. Sometimes it takes a single father and his blind daughter dancing in an empty ballroom at midnight to teach a CEO what it truly means to see. And sometimes kindness isn't just good for the soul. It's good for business, too. Because when Catherine's story leaked to the press, Hartwell Industries' stock soared. Applications flooded in from top talent wanting to work for a company with a heart, and customers lined up to support a business that valued people over profits. But none of that mattered as much as the sight of Sophie Thompson, spinning in her father's arms, dancing like the princess she'd always been, finally in a ballroom worthy of her light.